There is a growing movement with the passion of a revolution. They claim to represent the 99%. But what does that mean? And what is really going on? Some would dismiss this movement as fringe, communist, or anti-capitalist. But this development is in response to something very real, a crash that comes at the end of over 30 years of economic history and the dominance of a particular school of thought.
There was a idolizing of unfettered markets. And much, if not most, of the intelligentsia were duped.
The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works. Greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit. Greed in all of its forms. Greed for life, for money, for love, knowledge, has marked the upward surge of mankind, and greed, you mark my words, will not only save Teldar Paper, but that other malfunctioning corporation called the USA. Thank you very much.
The world runs on individuals pursuing their separate interests. The great achievements of civilization have not come from government bureaus. Einstein didn't construct his theory under order from a bureaucrat. Henry Ford didn't revolutionize the automobile industry that way. In the only cases in which the masses have escaped from the kind of grinding poverty you're talking about, the only cases in recorded history are where they have had capitalism and largely free trade.
So your view is then, if we all became more comfortable with our natural tendencies, that is to say, selfishness, there would be less horror, less war, less Hitler?
There wouldn't be any.
So the more selfish we are, the more kind, the more tranquil and peaceful the world in which we live?
And more benevolent toward other people, if we're rationally selfish.
Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
The government doesn't contribute anything except impediments.
So began a period of deregulation, reduced taxation, and an unbridling of the free market. The malaise of the late 70s gave way to the capitalistic renaissance of the 80s. The rich became super rich, and the ranks of the billionaire club grew from a handful to hundreds, then thousands. But at the same time, the middle class entered a period of stagnation that would last for 30 years. While the income of the top 1/10 of 1% grew by nearly 400% between 1970 and 2008, the bottom 90% would lose income during the same period of time. Anger at this inequality would be inevitable.
The issues are deeper. They involve large corporate structures. They involve the structure of the economy. They involve who owns things. The top 400 people in the United States own more wealth than the bottom 150 million. Let me say it again, the top 400 people own more wealth than the bottom 150 million, half the society. That is medieval. And I don't mean that rhetorically. That's the way medieval society was organized, and you cannot have a democracy if that goes on.
Here is what the numbers tell us. There you go. Last year, the nation's poverty rate was more than 15%. That's nearly 1% higher than in 2009. That may not seem like a big increase until you actually consider this. More than 46 million people lived in poverty last year. That is the highest number in 52 years. We're talking about more and more of your family members, your friends, your coworkers just struggling to survive. Now, what's the most heartbreaking is how this has actually devastated the children. Watch this. About 1 in every 5 children under 18 live in poverty, okay? There you go. The poverty rate for them is 22%. I want to point out that's higher than the nation's overall rate. And the rate for African American children is nearly 40%, 39.2%. And for Hispanic children, more than 1/3 live in poverty. And we are just scratching the surface here. Society is almost taking the shape of an hourglass.
What's happening is that the new poor are the former middle class. I get so, quite frankly, sick and tired of politicians talking all the time about and to the middle class, as if somehow the middle class is the same now as it was 10 or 12 years ago. Let's be clear about this. The new poor, as I said a moment ago, are the former middle class.
I see it with friends. I have two uncles who have lost their homes. It's more damaging to me to see it happen to other people. It killed everything they own it's just drain their 401ks trying to keep houses and keep kids in school and stuff.
I basically work as a scab for the New York City Department of Education because they don't hire teachers. What they do is they fill in these substitute positions and they refuse to hire teachers, and so they're saving money and they're not giving me health insurance.
It's not just the, quote, most oppressed. It is middle-class people who are losing their jobs. It is teachers. It is firemen. It is not only public workers. And it is people who sense, and young people who sense, there is something profoundly wrong with this.
Everybody was saying we're followers of Milton Friedman. Everybody was saying Frederick Hayek got it right. Everybody was saying marketize, commercialize, commodify. And we were still reading Lukács. And Lukács was saying commodification is not simply an asymmetric relation of power of bosses vis-a-vis workers. So workers are being more and more marginalized. Profits are being produced, wealth is being produced, hemorrhaged at the top, no fair distribution of that wealth or profit for workers. Poor are being demonized because they are viewed as those persons who are irresponsible, who will not work, who are always looking for welfare, i.e. failures in the society of success.
Don't blame Wall Street. Don't blame the big banks. If you don't have a job and you're not rich, blame yourself.
I was in a meeting back last May. I got a phone call from the Chinese embassy, and they wanted to know if I was available the following week to meet with He Yafei, who was the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of China, to exchange views. And fortunately for me, I was in town. So we get together, and the following week I'm sitting across from this fellow, and we exchange pleasantries. And the first question he asked me said, "So Ian, now that the free market has failed, what do you think the appropriate role of the state in the economy should be?"
It is in the nature of capitalism, and it's a theme running through the book, that it never seems to get acceptance by the vast majority of people. And the reason is that one of the key aspects of capitalism is competition, which is a very difficult thing when you are competed out of business.
That we should not have 24 million people in this country who can't find a full-time job, that we should not have 50 million people in this country who can't see a doctor when they're sick, that we shouldn't have 47 million people in this country who need government help in order to feed themselves, and we shouldn't have 15 million families who owe more on their mortgage than the value of their home.
Inequality is increasing. The data are just very clear. Part of it is the result strictly of the rapid increase in technology. But the reason I say it's crucially important is that you cannot have the benefits of capitalist market growth without the support of a significant proportion, and indeed virtually all of the people. And if you have an increasing sense that the rewards of capitalism are being distributed unjustly, the system will not stand.
You know, it's amazing. TV used to give Americans the reverse fantasy. What if you, normal person, suddenly became a millionaire? No. Now it's, so who are we kidding? You consider yourself lucky to hold on to your job deep frying chicken parts. But how'd you like to be briefly introduced to a millionaire? Wouldn't you like that? You can touch his garments. We have this fantasy that our interests and the interests of the super rich are the same. Like somehow the rich will eventually get so full that they'll explode. And the candy will rain down on the rest of us. like there's some kind of piñata of benevolence. But here's the thing about a piñata. It doesn't open on its own. You have to beat it with a stick.
New tone. New tone. That vitriolic rhetoric I've been hearing about.
Then came the crash of 2008 and the Great Recession. 7.9 million jobs were lost. Trillions in wealth lost. And worst of all, a sense of hope was lost. The conviction in the American dream was lost. And for minorities, the unemployment rate reached depression levels.
And we reached the brink, and the chickens came home to roost. And a few years ago, the unfettered markets led us off and over the brink. And all of a sudden, very few intellectuals want to be honest and acknowledge the degree to which they were duped.
Everyone has one. You have to exist, you need an ideology. The question is whether it is accurate or not. And what I'm saying to you is, yes, I found a flaw. I don't know how significant or permanent it is, but I've been very distressed by that fact. But if I may I just finish an answer to the question previously?
You found a flaw in the reality?
A flaw in the model that I perceived is the critical functioning structure that defines how the world works, so to speak.
In other words, you found that your view of the world, your ideology, was not right. It was not working.
Precisely. No, that's precisely the reason I was shocked, because I had been going for 40 years or more with very considerable evidence that it was working exceptionally well.
A flaw? Is that why they're out there protesting?
They're complaining about the fact that Wall Street wrecked the economy 3 years ago, and nobody's held responsible for that. Not a single person has been indicted or convicted for destroying 20% of our national net worth accumulated over the course of 2 centuries. They're upset about the fact that Wall Street has iron control over the economic policies of this country, and that one party is a wholly owned subsidiary of Wall Street, and the other party caters to them as well. That's the real truth.
We certainly are in a crisis. Our system is broken.